Okay, dear colleagues, dear friends, I think that time has come to start this new session of our conference. So I thank all of you for being here after our lunch. And I am sure we will have a very fruitful afternoon. And I promise as a moderator to keep this as interesting and passionate as possible for all of us. So my name is Deborah Bergamini. I'm a long-term politician in Italy, member of the Italian Parliament since 2008, Deputy Secretary National of my party, a long-time member of the Council of Europe Assembly since 2009, member of the Political Affairs and Monitoring Committee, but most of all, privileged rapporteur for a report of the Council of Europe on AI and how to prevent disruptions to the political and democratic processes that might be brought by AI. So an extremely timely topic, a lot of work, and of course, this conference will be part of my report, a substantial part of my report. I am learning very much. This morning, I think we had amazing opportunities to listen to people who are true experts and visionaries with respect to the many aspects of AI. When we speak about AI, we often focus on innovation, efficiency, competitiveness, that are all crucial issues. But today here in this house, we are called to reflect on something even more relevant, how AI is reshaping power, influence, and trust in our democracies. Power, influence, and trust. So important words. Democracy is not only about elections, about electoral campaign, but it's about informed citizens, transparent decision-making, accountability, and the freedom to form our opinions without being manipulated. Artificial intelligence now intervenes in each of these dimensions, often invisibly, without us being aware of it, often faster than political systems can react to. AI can amplify voices, can improve access to information and support citizen engagement, but it can also fragment public debate, personalize political messaging to the point of manipulation, increase polarization, undermine trust in institutions through disinformation or deepfakes, and algorithmic biases. This creates a paradox for our democratic systems. The same technology that can enhance participation can also weaken legitimacy. And I think that we should ask ourselves the consequences of all this more than ever today, where we experience all over the free world a low turnout in elections, a progressive, constant detachment of people from the democratic processes. As parliamentarians, we cannot afford to observe all this from the sidelines, nor can we delegate it entirely to experts, regulators, or private actors. The governance of AI in democratic life is first and foremost our responsibility, because it's a political responsibility. One of the central questions we should ask ourselves is this: who holds the power when algorithms shape political visibility, public debate, and even voter behavior? Algorithms are never neutral. They reflect values, incentives, and choices. When these choices influence democratic discourse, accountability becomes essential. And accountability in a democracy must ultimately lead back to elected institutions. At the same time, we must avoid a false dilemma. This is not a choice between innovation and/or democracy. It's about ensuring that innovation serves democratic values, not the other way around. Are we to become executives of AI algorithms, the electoral machine that this morning someone referred to, are we supposed to become an electoral machine, executing decisions that are taken by algorithms? This is the key existential questions that us as politicians should ask ourselves. Europe has chosen a distinctive path grounded in human rights, the rule of law, democratic oversight. This is a strength and must remain a strength, never to be considered a weakness. But we also must be honest. Regulation alone is not enough. If it is disconnected from political understanding, parliamentary capacity, and public awareness. Parliament needs tools, knowledge, confidence to engage with AI, not as passive rule takers, but as active shapers of democratic safeguards. Otherwise, we risk a gap between technological power and democratic control, with all the dangers that come within. This session brings together perspectives from parliamentary practice, strategic communication, civil society. That diversity is not accidental. It reflects a simple truth. No single actor can govern AI's impact on democracy alone. So our task today is to maybe not produce easy answers, but to ask the right questions, and I will do this with my prestigious speakers. I hope this discussion will be very frank, maybe adding some little contribution to the streamline of all the contributions along these 2 days. So I am now very happy to and invite our speakers. And I would like to start from Nusrat Ghani. She is a Conservative MP, made history as the party's first female Muslim MP in 2015. And then she became the second woman elected chairman of Ways and Means and the first person of color to serve as deputy speaker. I'm very proud to have you at this, at this panel, by the way, Nursat. Also, you have been serving as a minister for a number of years and encountered innovation in your political life for a long time and in many different ways. You have also been sanctioned by China for raising up questions with respect to the security of AI and all the implication for our lives. So I am sure that you have a lot to tell us about risks and opportunity of AI. So you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, and good afternoon and welcome to Parliament. This is Committee Room 14, and in case you don't know, there's something called the 1922 Committee that sort of is the union of the Conservative Party, and this is the room that we tend to meet in. So this is where we do votes of no confidence in our Prime Minister. So this is a very historic room indeed. I can see 2 Conservative MPs in here, probably are traumatised from being in this room previously. I am indeed Nusrat Ghani. I've been an MP since 2015. And around 2016, I began to explore issues around power, influence and trust, especially when it comes to the media and social media, when at the time it was around algorithms and the exposure to young people to extremism content. And that then moved on to me being able to be interested in power and influence when it came to China and the platforms that they hold. And I was incredibly anxious that if we weren't having the discussions around AI and technology in our own time and space, we may be forced to buy products from a state or an institution that would not be like-minded to us, like-minded in the sense wanting to protect and promote liberal democracies. So I've been around this space for some time. When I was elected as Deputy Speaker, I wanted to work with, obviously with the endorsement of the Speaker's office, to work with the whole of the parliamentary estate to make sure we were asking the right questions so we could be prepared in delivering parliaments for the future. So I'm very lucky to have the senior clerk, Sarah, who's back. Sarah, wave your hands because you can answer any super technical questions. One of the senior clerks here on the estate. So we're trying to do 2 things. Is one, work out, like any industry, how do we adopt AI to become more efficient, productive and transparent, but also deal with the big issue, how do we adopt AI to protect the work that we're doing like any other industry and any other business, and that's protecting Parliament, making sure that we are not having our algorithms in any way manipulated, and owning the content end to end, and not being in a situation where we've got data centres that we don't have any control over. This is a discussion that we've been having in this Parliament for quite some time, and we've been able to legislate in this space as well. But working with Parliament brings its own dynamic because we're dealing with MPs, which are difficult to manage. We're dealing with the relationship between us and our constituents, which is difficult to manage. We're also creating law in real time, which is difficult to try and have a large language model, try and get ahead of that curve and advise us in that space. First of all, I need to say thank you to the IPU and the CPA. They're doing a huge amount of work in this space. And even though in the UK, I would argue we're ahead of the curve, a part of our responsibility is to share that information with other parliaments that aren't yet up to speed. So I'm really pleased that the CPA and the IPU are working in this space as well. So for quite some time, we've been talking about data. We've been talking about our relationship between our constituents because there seems to be a massive space between the work that we do here and how our voters and our constituents think that we are delivering legislation. And then the third thing is thinking about the threats that are forthcoming or already in place when we have sort of a disruption around elections. How do we protect ourselves from those countries and those state actors? And I would like to share the sort of work we're doing in this space, if I may. First of all, we have 650 MPs in this place, and they're all on their own journey in adopting AI. We can't, as an estate or setting up a speakers panel in this space, make MPs do anything, but we know that they are exploring levels of AI, and we are anxious that if the right safeguards or the guardrails aren't in place, they'll be exposing themselves to any sort of misinformation that could happen, but also damaging our relationship between us and our constituents as well. So we have put together a artificial intelligence guidance for members. Have any of you guys read this or come across this already to date? So this basically gives a very simple guide how we think we should be doing business in this space whilst realising there's much more work to be done. And this is sort of a working tool for lots of MPs to manage how they adopt AI going forward. A lot of MPs approach us because they're worried about safety. They're worried about their identity being manipulated or their data being manipulated as well, or their relationship between their constituents being damaged in any way. And I don't think we've got the right balance there yet, but we're trying to work out how we can offer a really nice balance in that space. The second is the admin of this place. We have a remarkable number of debates taking place, a remarkable number of written ministerial questions. I think thousands and thousands are. How many are tabled every day, Sarah?
Top level up to 700 a day on a Monday, for example.
What we're doing here is easily accessible not only to our voters but also to MPs as well. So we've already started exploring how we can use AI when it comes to Hansard, which is our written documentation for the work that we do every day. How we can use AI in tabling questions so MPs can be more efficient and our voters can know what we're doing. And also we've also been exploring and adopting Copilot, which enables MPs to manage their casework when it comes to their constituents too. But we want to take it even further. We want Parliament to be even more transparent so we can be more, people can see that we are absolutely the right thing to come out and vote for your MPs and you can understand exactly what the MPs are doing day in, day out. We want to be as effective as we can be and as productive as we can be as well. And then my primary reason for setting up and working on the AI Commission, I want to make sure that we are creating the technology, writing our own programmes and owning the data end to end. I don't want to be in a situation where we ever have to buy a product off the shelf to do any of the AI work in Parliament or MPs, and we do not have absolute ownership. And that means owning the data centres, having understanding of where this data is kept, understanding and owning our own algorithms, and in some future, maybe not in my lifetime, if any of this data was to be commercialised, it's commercialised for the estate that is Parliament, because all the work that we do is undertaken by taxpayers' money. And what I've seen in my experience when I'm working around the world is that many parliaments haven't thought about this. They haven't even had the most basic conversations about AI. They haven't legislated in any other industry, so they're not even ready to legislate how that means for Parliament, their parliaments, or their MPs, so that space is completely open. Or they're not being honest about the absolute threats. The threats aren't just companies, they're also countries that don't share our values as well. And you mentioned earlier on about what Europe is doing and the international law that can govern this space. But when you're dealing with countries like China, international law will not govern what they do or how they manipulate data. So we have to think about not the mainstream actors that we are obsessed about, whether it's Google, Microsoft, those companies that are based in the West that we can have some power and authority over, but deal with countries and companies that in no way will abide by any of the international norms and rules. I'm not sure what it's like in your country, but we have fewer and fewer people coming out to vote at elections. People are engaging in politics in spaces that we no longer contribute at. They're at dark spaces on the dark web in groups that we don't contribute to. And democracy just does not evolve over time. It's an industry. You have to spend time and money and energy in protecting it. And my concern is if we don't do this right here, right now, we are undermining democracy as we see functioning for us, and it won't function the same way for our children and our grandchildren. I am keen that what we're doing in the UK, that we share with any country that wants to work with us or learn as fast as we do. I think it's a responsibility for us over here in the West to show what we know and share the mistakes that we've made, and people to understand everything from procuring contracts when it comes to technology firms, understanding the legislative programme as well. I think it's a massive responsibility, because if any one of our countries that's liberal democracy is under threat, it's a burden on all of us. So I'm keen to share what we can deliver globally, not just here in the UK. I'm going to run out of time now very quickly. So I will end there and happy to answer any questions. The only other thing I want to make is, as an MP, it is my responsibility to legislate, but we cannot do this work alone, which is why it's so important that you work with your professionals. For me, it is the clerks on the estate, you will have your equivalents. It's the technology teams on the estate, you will have your equivalents there as well. It's a massive team effort, and it's a huge project. And the challenge that we have, any other industry can do a soft launch and make a few mistakes. When you're dealing with democracy and the people, we have no space to make a mistake. So getting it right the first time you launch this is incredibly important, which is why we have to make sure we're working together and we're protecting each other as like-minded countries. Thank you so much.
So, thank you very much, Norsat. I'm impressed by the pace of innovation, even within the Parliament. And I just have two brief comments, rather questions. One is that you underlined the relevance of data ownership. And in general, the literacy, AI literacy, to be developed on the part of parliamentarians. And I agree on that. If parliamentarians are not literate on what they should consider as a priority, that will never become a priority, and we will always be followers for what regards the AI development. So I wanted you to maybe expand a little bit on this. And the second, something you referred to as well, is that basically AI is a geopolitical issue now. Because we see very clearly confrontation between a model, that of China, that does not respect rules and is a control-based model, a lot of state within, and the more liberal democratic model that is represented by the Western world with all its limits and inefficiency or inadequacies or whatever. But Europe is in between, and this is something that maybe we should consider more often when we do our work and we do our political work. The fact that AI is not only a transformation, but probably is the most relevant and urgent geopolitical issue today.
I'm not saying this because my colleagues are in the room, but I would argue that the parliamentarians in the UK Parliament are pretty much au fait with AI. And if you've been an MP, I've been an MP for around 10 years, and we've been looking, since I've been an MP, we've always been investigating this space, especially because we've been dealing with technology and algorithms when it comes to young people being exposed to content that isn't healthy, the rise of extremism on social media platforms. And we've been quite au fait around algorithms because we tackled companies like TikTok and its parent company ByteDance when it comes to China. So I think quite a few MPs will be aware of this. We also have incredibly powerful select committees in our Parliament who've done reports in this space when it comes to companies like Microsoft or Google or China or Russia and electoral interference. So knowledge amongst backbench MPs is quite broad and quite wide. And for MPs that have got a super interest in this, there's spaces for them to go to learn more. So I would argue that the MPs in the UK Parliament are pretty au fait. We also have quite a young parliamentary intake at the last election who are already exploring the space. So looking at AI versions of themselves, like AI models that can go out and manage their casework and meet their constituents, and that also are talking quite confidently, at some point commercialising their own content. They very much understand that when they're contributing in Parliament, it's their voice, It's their physical appearance, it's their contribution, and they don't want anybody else commercialising and monetising that. So I would argue that UK MPs are probably pushing me and Sarah and the team faster than we can go because we have to take the whole of the estate with us. But the desire to deliver more is most definitely there. And I think lots of MPs also understand, you want your electorate to come out and vote for you. And as our electorate, we may have voters as young as 16 coming out to vote the next election. If we aren't communicating with them with the technology that they're used to, we're going to miss out on a whole swathe of the population that needs to go out and contribute to our election. And they're obviously involved in social media platforms that we aren't aware of. And also they'll be guided by algorithms that we have no control over. So lots of MPs, I'd say, are pretty much knowledgeable about this. But we also have a number of events that take place on the estate to get people up to speed on this, whether it's the CPA, the IPU, or lots of other activities take place on the estate. When it comes to, you mentioned about geopolitics and in the issue in Europe. My only challenge with Europe is that Europe can only legislate at a particular pace. And my anxiety is that when you're legislating at a pace, your legislation is already out of date when it comes to how fast AI can move. And you're also legislating for companies and individuals that abide by the international order. I'm not sure how that applies to companies and countries that are outside the international order, which is why it's so important that when we are creating any sort of tech or AI to enable us to deliver parliament or democracy more efficiently, that we do not outsource that out to anybody else but ourselves. We have to be absolutely accountable and own the data end to end. Money is going to come from data. So we need to make sure we own that end to end. And I know that we had a major speech by the most senior person responsible for security in this country today. And I believe she's going to spend quite a lot of time speaking about technology and security threats, not just the old-fashioned security threats. So the space moves far too fast for some time for legislators, and we need to be nimble as well in this space too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Norsa. Thank you. I would like to give the floor to Daniel Milewski, who's a member of Parliament, a colleague of mine in Poland, first elected in 2015, and he sits in the Committee on Digitization, Innovation and New Technologies. So again, you meet AI every day. And also you're a member of the Legislative Committee and you're a member of the Council of Europe since 2016. You have a PhD in law. I am sure that your view will be very interesting, also coming from a country that has had a really fast-growing reality in the last few years. You have the floor, Daniel.
Thank you, Deborah. Good afternoon. It's, of course, a privilege to share this stage with such esteemed voices. We are discussing this topic under quite a heavy title, Risks and Opportunities. It makes it sound very binary, almost like a battle. So let me start by making it a bit lighter. Think of a pen. You can touch it. In the hands of a poet, this pen can draft a moving sonnet. In the hands of a tyrant, it can sign a cruel order. And as a parent, I should also add that in hands of a small child, it can ruin quite a few carpets. Now, we don't usually discuss if the pen is evil, do we? It might sound like a cliché, but I find this point important to emphasize. The morality resides not in the material, but in the intent of the user. Artificial intelligence is not a sci-fi deity and is definitely not a demon. It's a tool. Yes, a highly sophisticated, very impressive tool, but a tool nonetheless. And just like the hammer that can be used to build a house or injure someone, AI is definitely entirely by human application. My message today will not be revolutionary. Let us not fear the tool, but train its users. In October, my parliament, on my initiative, together with PACE, organized a conference in Warsaw where we also discussed this topic. Thank you very much for active participation of many of you. One of our experts said that something that really struck me. During the Arab Spring, social media were lauded as tools for democratization. It was our fault and negligence that we allowed this tool to be hijacked by malicious actors like Russia to sow divisions and interfere in our domestic processes. The same thing was happening with AI. Russia had been outperforming and countered disinformation channels of democratic world already before AI became a significant factor. With AI, the situation is even worse. I don't think the biggest problem we have with domestic processes is associated with a particular tool. Our problem is the lack of a genuine commitment to use the same tools to defend against the aggressors and malicious actors. Damien Cottier, the chair of our PACE AI committee, is a rapporteur on the elections in terms of crisis. It will be discussed during the January part session. And in the report, he recommends that digital dangers are a strategic risk for democratic systems and elections. As you know, I am currently preparing a report for the Parliamentary Assembly on the use of AI by parliaments. After my critical introduction, I guess I will have to drop the second part of the title, Risks and Opportunities. Anyway, when preparing my introductory memorandum, I confirmed that the future has already arrived while we are busy debating it. The last 27 chambers in the EU member states have already implemented AI tools. Almost all plan or consider AI implementation. Examples include transcription, summarization, and even cross-referencing or checking compliance with other legislation. If deployment and implementation are carried out responsibly with due to consideration for possible risks, I don't see how this can lead the Terminator scenario. This is efficiency, the boring magic of improved governance. Naturally, we must be mindful by algorithmic bias, hallucinations, unreliable data, or other risks. But these risks must be identified not to ban or fear the technology, but to unlock its minimum benefits. Look at aviation. We don't restrict air travel after every accident. We introduce better quality materials, require regular maintenance checks, learn from mistakes. We regulated the risks so we could enjoy the benefits. I think we should follow the same method with technology. So how do we go about building a control tower for AI? Whenever regulating something new, there is always a temptation to demand rigid for tough measures. Yet, current state of global affairs demonstrates that this solution might not be the right one. I appreciate that the Council of Europe has done what the Council of Europe has done with its framework convention on AI. I am of course aware of criticism, including that expressed by the Parliamentary Assembly in its 2024 opinion, that the convention does not apply to private entities and excludes national security and national defense from its scope. While I'm sure we all realize that politics and negotiation are an art of compromise, I think the power of this instrument lies in certain flexibility that it offers. States are allowed to decide how they implement it, provided that they adhere to core principles. It's not a weakness, it's a strength. In this spirit, we can regulate the harmful uses and clear the path for this positive to flourish. Imagine an official governmental chatbot allowing a citizen to ask how the proposed bill will affect my energy prices, and receive an instant, accurate, easy to understand answer. This has a tremendous potential to rebuild trust in democratic institutions and bring governance closer to citizens. As parliamentarians, we are architects. AI is created by engineers and scientists, but the boundaries are drawn by us. By adopting a flexible, rights-based approach, we set the boundaries necessary to identify key challenges, to enable ourselves to react to new developments, and to allow technological advancement to free us to do what humans do best: emphasize and lead. To conclude, let me revert to my example with the pen. We can't afford to be too afraid to pick up the pen because it might make a mess. Instead, we should pick it up, and steadily guide it to write the next chapter of democracy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. And I actually very much like the idea of us politicians as architects. But of course, again, when you are an architect, you need to have a very clear idea of the structure you want to set up. And with AI developing so fast, it is more and more difficult to try even to imagine how to design the next structure. And so, you know, my question would be like, for example, in the democratic process, with all this misinformation, all these tools of propaganda that are being spread, we are seeing, for example, also in these weeks very much. What do you think we could do as architects of our people in order to help people developing a better awareness of how they can be manipulated, if they are? Or maybe they like to be manipulated because they want to say, okay, I don't want to have an opinion on this. I want someone who prepares it for me. So do you think that it's too late, or we could do something in order to raise this awareness?
It has many levels. For example, electoral commissions should have been equipped with AI detection tools, for example, which maybe also major platforms should be required to highlight content, particularly deepfakes generated with the use of AI. Every day brings new challenges.
I agree. And this is why I'm very proud of being a member of PACE. I think that since the very beginning of the AI effect, let's say, PACE has always been at the spearhead, being very courageous when at the beginning it was even more difficult, maybe. And I think that the framework on AI that we just signed is something that should be promoted as much as we can all over the places, because that is something that gives you exactly a framework, and maybe people can get, you know, used to ask themselves some question more with respect to when they, for example, are giving their permission to the use of data and all that, maybe in order to ask themselves maybe once more, am I doing the thing I really want to do? Am I aware of what I'm doing? And this is a cultural transformation that I think we should all help to shape and to be together with the digital transformation as it is. Well, thank you very much, Daniel. And now, also because time is running, and now the floor goes to Marco Camisani Calzolari. Marco is Italian, expert on digital transformation, AI, very well known in Italy. He's also an advisor to the Italian government, and this gives me the opportunity to say that also in Italy we've had a law on AI. Maybe then later you will have the chance to say something about that. He's lived in London and now lives in New York. So I think that your point of view, since you are an expert for a long time, would be very interesting as someone who is out of politics but helps politics to define the next steps.
Absolutely.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you. So I would like to focus on 3 issues, I say pillars, in my view, decides whether democratic governance succeeds or fails. But before the 3 pillars, one enabling condition. So, because none of this works without citizens as allies. If people do not understand what is changing, they will treat piracy, safeguard, and AI ethics as bureaucracy or as an annoyance. They will not demand protection, they will not use protection, they will not recognize manipulation when it happens. Trying to secure democracy without public does not work. Well, a technical clarification matters here, and I include myself in this. I also, in my books, and sometimes refer to this system as algorithms, but it's wrong. I'm not making a linguistic sophism, but when we communicate to the public, terminology becomes crucial. Many algorithms are deterministic, so you can define the rules in advance, and the same input produces the same output. Large language models are different. They are neural networks that work on probabilistic basis. They generate outputs by estimating what is most likely next, based on patterns learned from data. Calling them simply algorithms, and I'm one of the guilty guys that use it often, so I'm not complaining, but hides how unpredictable and hard to fully define their behavior currently is. And this misunderstanding feeds unrealistic expectations of control and reliability. Anyway, so the pillars. First pillar, paid influence. Generative AI is changing what people see and also what people write, how they argue, and how they organize reasoning. It tries on behalf of them. For the user, it feels like dialogue. Of course, dialogue produces trust. Trust lowers skepticism. Citizens ask for guidance, not just for facts. They share personal situations, doubts, intentions, and that makes influence continuous, personalized, and normalized. And now connect this to business models. A Reuters investigation recently, based on internal documentation, reported that Meta projected roughly 10% of this year's revenue, about $16 billion, would come from ads tied to scam and prohibited goods. The crucial point is what this reveals about tolerance inside incentive structures. If a company is willing to accept that level of revenue from content that is clearly harmful or deceptive, we should be concerned about what it may accept when influence moves inside language itself, inside framing, inside persuasion. And this is already being discussed in part of the AI industry. Sponsored content embedded directly inside AI responses and generated text, not banners, not separate ads. Content blended into answers, hard to distinguish from neutral information. At that point, influence becomes advice. Paid persuasions enters in the reasoning process of citizens that creates a direct conflict between economic incentives and democratic integrity. This is a red line. Allowing paid influence inside AI outputs would create the most scalable persuasion infrastructure ever built, operating with weak transparency and without meaningful consent. Then, second pillar. Cybersecurity and model poisoning. Because influence on democracy does not only come from persuasion and advertising. It also comes from cyber attacks that change the behavior of the model itself. Model poisoning is a cyber attack in every meaningful sense. An external actor manipulates the data and the system learns from or the system that updated, so the model starts producing distorted outputs. and the system remains online. The content looks normal, but the reasoning is quietly shifted. The citizen does not see it, and often the institution relying on the system that doesn't see either. In my work with the Italian National Cybersecurity Agency, I've seen this phenomenon becoming increasingly common. That is why this is not only a regulatory issue, it's also a cybersecurity issue. Because if AI systems influence public opinion, access to right, or institutional decision, they must be treated as critical infrastructure. And critical infrastructure require a security posture that matches the impact. Secure data pipelines, provenance and integrity controls, continuous monitoring, red teaming, incident response, and clear accountability when models are compromised. Without this, democratic integrity becomes vulnerable to silent, scalable manipulation. And then the third pillar, ethics. Much has been said today about aligning AI with human values. Alignment is now familiar. Models should behave ethically. Systems should respect human dignity. We agree on that. But a political question is often skipped. Aligned to which values? And decided by whom? Over the last decade, projects like, probably some of you remember, the MIT Moral Machine, have shown something clear. People do not share the same moral priorities. Values differ across cultures, regions, social contexts. Even within the same country, ethical choices diverge sharply. A single neural moral baseline is not available in practice. So when we say align to human values, the real governance issue is which values are embedded and who chooses them. If this remains implicit, ethics becomes an invisible layer of power applied at a scale without democratic debate. This is why personalized ethics becomes necessary. I'm one of the few talking, for maybe the only one, about personalized ethics. Because personalized ethics means that an AI system explicitly declares which values it applies and under which authority, and allows those values to be adapted to legitimate democratic contexts within clear boundaries and safeguards. And this is not moral relativism. It's democratic governance of value choices with transparency, traceability, and accountability. So human responsibility, of course, must remain human. And this is the core of cyberhumanism, the philosophy I wrote about. And when AI produces an output that can affect decisions, right, money, or safety, a human must verify it. Now we have autonomous agents, and that could be really, really dangerous, because we need verification, not delegation. Responsibility cannot be outsourced to an interface. I say this also from a direct policy experience. I contributed to the drafting of the Italian AI law as part of the 13 members committee, and I worked on the code of practice as well. But from that perspective, these principles are under pressure. There is a real risk of stepping backwards as large actors push for a weaker obligation, less transparency, and looser accountability. Often justified as competitiveness. But personalized ethics also need evidence. As a starting point for study, I created a platform that helps to do that. And, well, it's not a substitute for regulation. It's a practical tool to support democratic oversight. If institutions, researchers, or parliaments want to collaborate, the doors are open. And final point, the most important one. Everything we discuss today tends to stay inside rooms like this, inside institutions, inside expert circles. When news talk about AI only, they talk about AI only in a sensationalism way, the news about AI, but they don't talk about this. So outside, most citizens do not see the context we're living in. Absolutely. I do videos every day talking about this. Teenagers do not realize that they are being influenced by a company. Younger children can't believe the AI is alive. You can't believe they speak with AI speakers. And many adults assume that the system is neutral. So AI is neutral. AI is not neutral. People do not know that language can be influenced at scales. So they don't know that AI outputs can be paid for. They don't know that models can be poisoned. And they don't know that ethical choices are being embedded silently. So if citizens do not understand the environment they live in, they cannot defend themselves. And if they cannot defend themselves, democracy cannot defend itself. That is why awareness and public education are not optional. They are a democratic necessity. We need to bring debate outside these walls, into schools, media, workplace, and everyday life. Otherwise, we'll keep designing protection for people who do not know they need protection. Parliament is used to, not only this one, parliaments, to regulate power, but without informed citizens, regulation remains fragile. Awareness is the missing layer. Without it, none of the pillars will hold. Thank you.
Well, Marco, thank you very much. You really pointed out at some elements that will have us thinking thoroughly about them. The paid influence or sponsored consensus embedded. So when we were discussing about awareness, this is exactly the contrary. But what struck me more, even more, is about this idea of ethics as a personalized dimension. And it is true in the end. Of course, ethics is general. If I think of the Declaration of Human Rights, that is very broad and everybody feels like he's part of the declaration. But then ethics is personal in the end.
Yeah.
So can you expand briefly about this very interesting point you made?
Thank you. So ethics and values, of course, are personal. And the thing is that we should first define our personal values, because somebody we don't know. Now, when you are in front of a trolley problem of MIT moral machine, sometimes you discover things about yourself. There is a robot at home that is an intelligent anthropomorphic robot, because now we are talking about something digitally generated. But in a few years, we will be here again, I hope to be one of you, talking about artificial anthropomorphic robots that act like us and think like the intelligent AI that we already know. And in that case, if we have a robot at home that is the same that will, I don't know, make works in a factory, and then it helps to run the dog and clean the table, and that's home duties, and it is alone, and there is a problem with the house, would you save the house or the dog? And at the moment, this is of course, it's extreme, no? But the point is, it's clear that you don't know what AI and physical AI in the next future is deciding for you on your behalf. And that's very important. You cannot rely, your decisions. In fact, my series that I do every day is artificial decisions on socials. That's the point. So that's it. And so I created this ethics profile, is the name of the platform, but it's not a commercial thing. It's already there, just to be tested. And first you create the profile, then you connect it to the AIs. Some AIs are helpful and willing to have the user's profile, somebody else is not. But we will find a way, the pressure from politics and people would help. That's it.
Thank you very much. And now the floor to our last speaker, Laura Lázaro Cabrera. She is the Council and Founding Program Director for Equity and Data at the Center for Democracy and Technology, Europe. She leads the organization working promoting fundamental rights in artificial intelligence policy and regulation, and has closely worked on the implementation of the EU's Artificial Intelligence Act. So I am sure that we will hear interesting things for you on the European point of view. Thank you very much, and you have the floor, Laura.
Thank you very much, Chair, for your thoughtful moderation of this panel, to my fellow speakers for their insightful comments thus far, and to the organizers for putting this relevant conference together. Indeed, we've been closely involved in the implementation of the Artificial Intelligence Act, a law that has proven to be highly controversial, and even more so these days that we're talking about simplification and revisiting some core aspects of the EU Digital Rulebook, including the AI Act itself, even as the ink on it is barely dry, with the law having been adopted last year. So when I was first invited to this panel, I found the title quite interesting because it talks about the risks of and opportunities posed by AI in democratic processes. And the first thought that came to mind was, are we talking about the impact of AI on democratic processes at large, or are we talking about embedding AI in democratic processes? And indeed, it seems from some of the interventions I've heard and conversations I've had earlier today that it seems that we're leaning towards the latter. We're trying to think very proactively about the ways in which AI can be useful to make democracy an even more fruitful exercise. And to me, speaking with the NGO hat on, this comes with a series of concerns. AI already has opacity and complexity risks, which have been elaborated upon in the earlier panels this morning. But the reality is that these risks are amplified and exponentially worsened when we're thinking about incorporating these technologies in processes that are crucial to the democratic life of a nation and to the exercise of civil and political rights. So I'd like to start first reflecting on the approach that has been taken by the European Union on approaching specifically risks to democratic processes posed by AI, and borrowing from some of those lessons learned and thinking about sketching out some necessary mitigations. My presentation will focus really on 3 points, but I'd like to start with one call for clarification, really, and it's the need to be crystal clear about what we mean when we're talking about AI. We've used the term quite broadly today, and indeed the Framework Convention applies a broad definition, which is a good thing. But the devil here is in the details, and we need to be clear on what...
Can you sit back a bit?
Sorry.
Yes, sit.
Okay.
Just not so close. Don't touch it. Just sit there.
Okay.
Where you are. Stay back a bit.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me all right? Is this better?
But you cannot follow it.
Okay. Thank you. So when we think about AI and how it's used in democratic processes, we need to know exactly what kind of technology we're talking about. And this is because the safeguards and restrictions that will be attached to it will need to reflect the nature of the technology itself. So as you might already know, the AI Act takes a risk-based approach, which basically devises proportionate safeguards and restrictions based on the specific level that an AI system is deemed to pose. And the AI Act ranges from unacceptable risks and related prohibitions to minimal risk AI systems that there are virtually no restrictions or safeguards. And AI in democratic processes is deemed a type of AI system posing a high risk and therefore deserving of a series of safeguards ranging from fundamental rights impact assessments whenever deployed by public sector authorities, so electoral management bodies, for example, to risk management obligations more broadly down the pipeline. So when we're talking about AI in democratic processes, it's useful to think about what we would consider to be low-impact uses and high-impact uses. Low-impact uses might relate to productivity-related uses, such as summarizing information, devising strategic communications for campaigns, or even visual design. But the reality is that there are a lot of high-impact uses that we often forget because they probably don't look as accessible to many people, which might have to do with, first of all, everything that purports to replace human interaction, but also sensitive processes more broadly that are often out of the limelight, such as voter registration processes, for example, an AI system that might be used to eliminate duplicate entries in the voter roll, including voter information services more broadly, and any AI system used to provide information to the general public. So my first point here is, whenever we're thinking about regulation and policy, we need to ensure that the relevant uses of AI for democratic processes that are being considered are captured by the taxonomies in the legal and policy frameworks. I talked about the AI Act. The AI Act considers a high risk to carry high risk AI systems that are intended to be used for influence the outcome of an election or the voting behavior of people. Now, this sounds really broad and it sounds positive, but there is some clarity missing there. For example, would information sharing considered to be an AI system, for example, intended to influence people? So if we're looking at chatbots, as a tool to lower the information barriers for people to learn to vote, would that be covered? Would that be subject to the high-risk categorization or not? And if it's not, then we're missing out on a whole series of safeguards that might be useful for legitimizing the tool. Similarly, when it comes to voting advice applications, which might be intended towards informing people on the different agendas put forward by different candidates or political parties, is that considered to be something that might be intended to influence the vote or the outcome of an election? So here, there's a lot that's left out for interpretation, and unfortunately, because the devil is in the details, if something is not clearly within scope, then we might miss out on very relevant safeguards that we simply cannot afford to. I wanted to also reflect on something that was said in an earlier panel about the importance of focusing on instances of misuse. That is important, yes, but also we cannot assume that the use of AI is harmful only where there is bad faith and only when there is misuse. There's a lot of bad uses of AI that can emerge from completely good faith efforts, and it's important that when we think about introducing AI more broadly in democratic processes, we have these top of mind. The second point I wanted to make is to broaden the focus beyond generative AI. All the headline-grabbing use cases of AI that we've seen in the last few months have to do with impersonation. For example, the Joe Biden robocall, or the very recent example of the deepfake video representing successful presidential candidate in Ireland, Catherine Colony. These are harmful indeed, but there are many uses that relate to AI, again, far from the limelight, not as attractive, that can be incredibly harmful. For example, sensitive processes in the democratic exercise of the vote. We can think about AI systems that are focused on predicting polling stations that might present problems, AI systems use of voter list maintenance, and also biometrics-based voter authentication, a use of AI that's well known, been in place for several years, and that simply is completely forgotten when it comes to the conversation. So sometimes we also need to look at what's already been around for a while and the risk that this technology can pose, not just what's new and what's capturing the headlines. Lastly, I would like to emphasize really the importance of ensuring that all relevant actors in the ecosystem have distinct, clear responsibilities. And here, for once, I'd like to focus on the responsibilities of public sector authorities. It's really important that before proceeding with AI, public authorities, whether it be electoral management bodies or other entities, including candidates and MEPs, that we're really thinking about the problem that AI is intended to solve. What is the clear issue that AI could really present value added for? What is the issue that cannot be fixed by alternative means? And once we get there, really think about implementing important safeguards to ensure vendor transparency. Responsible procurement is incredibly resource intensive, and clear criteria to assess transparency proposed by a vendor is paramount. So what about the training data? If the AI system being on offer is built on a foundation model, to what extent have steps been taken to adapt that AI system to the particular use case? What is the AI optimized for? What are we doing in terms of evaluation and training? These are key questions to be asked that we unfortunately never hear a lot about. And we're conscious of the immense pressure that public sector entities are coming under to adopt AI solutions. We cannot just submit to the AI hype, and it's crucial that every authority and every actor in the electoral management process is keen to adopt these safeguards and questions. I'd also like to perhaps end on public transparency. It's really crucial to communicate to the public, and some folks have already made this point previously, but here I'd really like to call for more specificity. It's important for the public to know whenever an AI system is at play, why it's being deployed, and what the decision logic of the AI system is. What is the intended purpose? What's the ideal use case? What steps have been taken to ensure security and privacy? What risk management obligations are in place? And what steps have been taken to guarantee oversight and accountability? I'll end on that note. I look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Laura, thank you very much, and you gave us many, many elements of possible protection against risks. And I have a question, and then I'll, of course, open to the floor, and maybe you can just answer in a few moments. But the question is always the same. European Union, you worked on the AI Act, is accused of being regulating too much, and that this blocks the development of a real technological and innovative ecosystem in Europe, so limits the possibility of getting to a digital sovereignty. And also, our friends, the US, accuse Europe of penalizing the big tech because of excessive regulation. What is your standing point? What is your opinion on this?
What we've said all along is that this is a false dichotomy that's often being put forward between innovation and regulation. Strong regulation makes for a robust market when the obligations are clear and companies know what they need to do in order to be safe from liability. Companies have been calling for clarity all along, but unfortunately now the discourse has been captured by this prevailing narrative that indeed regulation comes at the cost of innovation. This isn't true, and many speakers have already pointed to the wonderful work of academic Anu Bradford in pointing out different reasons why, for example, the EU or the European Union might be lagging behind in innovation. It's not because of regulation, but it's merely because of different factors that are independent from the legislative makeup of the country. Again, the example of China was mentioned earlier today. China regulates AI very strongly, and their AI industry is booming. So what we say to folks in industry who often try to advance this argument is that that claim simply doesn't stand up to scrutiny, and indeed clearer, strong rules make up for a trustworthy environment, and an environment in which members of the public and public agencies can place their trust in AI and benefit businesses.
Okay, thank you very much. So you have seen, aren't they the best speakers in the whole conference? Okay. We have about 25 minutes to open the debate. Maybe you have questions. I hope you have questions, and our speakers will be more than happy to answer. So please go ahead. I cannot read everything, so just a very short introduction of each of you before asking the question that will help the speakers to respond. Okay. Professor, you are the first.
Hi, thanks. Joanna Bryson. I spoke earlier, so I won't introduce myself. It was a great panel. Thank you very much. But I have a bit of an issue with the talk by the guy who just got up. So maybe we should just skip it. Okay. Come back if he comes. Is he coming back? Okay, all right. Then call on me again later. Okay.
So Professor Bryson will ask later. Then Petra Bayer, the floor to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. When we heard in the last session that the time gap between the development of a new technology and the proper reaction on that to manage the possible negative incomes is output is about 4 years. I wonder how could it be possible at all to react on a very short term when we see that there is a disruption of democracy, if there is taken influence by other states, by whomever. Is there any means at all to react also quickly?
Okay, I will pick up another couple of questions and then, and then we'll proceed. Lady.
Thank you. Well, I'm Luz Martinez from Spain, and my question is aimed at Marco Camisani, and it's partly related to the previous panel, because obviously when we talk about artificial intelligence, the framework of values, principles, as you mentioned, is highly important, and taking into account that this is developing so fast that whenever we think that we are reaching an agreement on certain topics, there is something new raised. So probably the question is, what is going to be the limit, that framework that we all can share in terms of accepting the principles of an ethical framework in artificial intelligence, especially when we are, when this is covering really delicate age groups like minors, children, teenagers, and I want to link this with the previous panel when it was this issue raised regarding what is the limit, in terms of protecting children or developing artificial intelligence when we know that we are getting children in danger or under risk because of all the different dangers that this is being raised. Thank you.
Thank you. I will pick up one other question, and we'll close the first round of questions, then answers, and then the second round. Please.
Thank you for this very impressive and brilliant presentations. I'm Sevilay Çelenk from Turkish National Assembly. My question can be considered a little bit philosophical, and I would like to direct these questions to Mr. Calzolari or Ms. Cabrera. I believe most of us would accept that the democratic values are extensively fostered and strengthened by art, by literature, by philosophy, and by journalistic writing and thinking. And if all those areas are largely affected and transformed by AI technologies, and the genuinely original thoughts, texts, and artworks start to be lost in the world of AI, can creativity, critical thought, and democratic way of thinking and discussion can still survive? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So regarding this first round, maybe the first question about Petra on the pacing gap.
Yeah.
Maybe
Petra, my pushback will be that we're not even prepared to deal with the status quo at the moment. We already accept, we've had evidence, and we all know this, that there are algorithms putting information out there to our constituents, our voters, that may not be honest and absolutely reflective. We know that we haven't been able to manage the commercialization or monetization of the algorithm, so it's being managed by people that don't share our interests. So I would argue that we're not even legislating for the situation right now. And how quickly can we do that to protect our citizens and protect our democracies before we even worry about the next stage? I think if we accept the status quo, then maybe we can move along. I think for too long we see a lot of these companies as our enemy. We need to be leaning in and working with them. I think a lot of companies just want to make money. We need to follow where that money is and maybe work with them and be really afraid of where the threats will come. And I would argue the threats would come from institutions and countries that want to threaten our liberal democracies. So it's not just about the time lag, which will get narrower and narrower. It's our ambition to work in this space, because so many of our legislators are working what impacts our voters, our constituents right here, right now. We don't think about the AI space because it's not something that we can communicate easily to our constituents, or we think it's going to make a major difference at the next ballot box. But we need to spend time and money and energy in this space right now. And before we just go to Marco, the lady from Spain spoke about accepting principles and having a framework. I've spent a few months, well, occasionally I get to work with other parliamentarians and other MPs in this space. And I would argue that even though they want to do the right thing, we don't share the same principles. So my objective in the UK is to be as transparent as I can, to work with my team here. And I would argue that lots of other parliaments and parliamentarians do not want to be absolutely transparent. And they will be leaning into their political parties' ambitions or ensuring that power is not dispersed as easily as we think. And we have to understand that there is that problem when it comes to politics. And we can't, if we don't get that right, then that power base will remove from us completely. And I'll leave Marco to deal with the rest of the ethics, which is a much bigger question.
Yes. So the limit cannot be technical at all. It must be political and legal. That's it. So if we wait for the technology to be, to tell us where to stop, it doesn't work. We will always be late. With minors, the principle will be only one. Children cannot be a testing ground. That's it. So any AI that can influence a child learning, a child attention, that could touch emotions or behavior should not be deployed without a prior risk assessment, real human oversight, and clear legal accountability. That's the point. So it's not about banning AI in education. It's about using it in a proper way, in a non-negotiable conditions, because they must have transparency on how it's used with our kids. So because protecting children means setting boundaries before harm happens. That's the only way.
Thank you so much. I'd like to come in and answer Ms. Baer's question and also the question that was asked at the back. So to start with Ms. Bayer's question, I think indeed it's difficult to regulate for a technology that keeps rapidly changing, but there are a few useful principles and processes that can be put in place. So the first thing that needs to be there is transparency. We might not have the tools to ensure accountability now, but without transparency, we're surely not preparing ourselves to hold relevant actors accountable in the future. So transparency needs to be there. And the reality is that the private sector actors working in the space know exactly what transparency should look like, and they are able to make this transparency possible. So setting a high bar for that. The other thing is checks and balances, if not for public sector, then for critical industries or critical fields, ensuring that there are some areas, for example, law enforcement could be one, or even democratic processes at large, where there are higher safeguards and restrictions to wait and see how the technology develops. And finally, processes for enabling information gathering or information seeking from the companies that are putting together the AI systems at hand. It's really important, if those processes cannot be made accessible to the wider public, that there is at least a regulator that's empowered to be able to gather information quite freely and be able to approach the relevant private sector organizations for what might then hold the key for redress in the long run. To come at to the question at the back about AI stifling creativity, 100% that's happening. I mean, you've all seen generative AI being used to replicate people or events in the likeness of Studio Ghibli's art form, so these little cartoons that really are very typical of a particular studio in Japan. The reality is that for so long as we do not ensure that copyright law and policy can keep up with AI, we are definitely going to be disincentivizing creatives from putting their work online or doing their work, period, because there is no longer any reward or incentive for them to put in this level of work and then seeing it replicated without any credit, without any compensation by AI. That's a key part of the conversation that I think we need to be very mindful of whenever we choose to use generative AI technologies. What is it that we're implicitly endorsing, and what are the sacrifices and trade-offs that are being made?
Thank you, Laura. Then I will go for another round of 3 questions, and then there will be the last round of 2 questions. So, second round, Morgan Jensen, you all have the floor.
Thank you very much, Deborah, and thank you very much, I think, for very precise and also thought-bringing interventions. And my question goes to Mr. Solari, and that's about, actually that has not come to my mind before, but of course, paid content within AI. First, could you give examples of how that's happening, and also how do we regulate that? Because of course, you know, commercials and paid content and other medias are being declared and so on. So that's my first question. And then for Ms. Cabrera, the fake images or deep fake created by AI. In Denmark, we just, is introducing a law on that where we use the copyright principles, that you have the right to your own face and your own special, through your person. Do you see other ways of trying to regulate that specific problem? Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. Professor Bryson, maybe, I don't know what will happen.
Well, he's still not back yet, but at the same time, actually, Narsakani might be able to answer the question, although, I mean, my critique of what he was saying was that he brought up this really good point. We've been talking a lot about false dichotomies. So like regulation and innovation, he brought up like risk and opportunity, but then he made one, I think, in saying that, tools, the exact thing was, don't fear the tools, train the users. Well, I think as we've been hearing, the tools can be damaging or beneficial, of course, and we need to train the users anyway. But in the particular case that I was worried about was this example about, the users asking, I'm sorry, not the users, as you beautifully did, focusing on the voters, right? So the voters asking, how is my, right, here's your question. So you talked about the voters.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, okay. So the voters are asking about how their energy prices are going to be altered by the legislation. An AI tool will tell you, oh, it's going up 23%, right? An actual parliamentarian would say, well, Russia just attacked Ukraine, so it's absolutely essential that we change our source of energy and that we need to make sacrifices. This is only for 6 months, right? So I wasn't entirely buying I think you introduced your own false dichotomy between the not trusting the tools and thinking we need to train the users.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Fanucci, Francesca Fanucci.
Thank you. I keep being miffed a bit by the statements that I hear, not only this conference, about. The first is that, again, we must not over-regulate, because I keep wondering, perhaps there's a misunderstanding, what do we mean by over-regulation? What do we mean by too much regulation that the industry can cope with? And secondly, I was also struck by another statement that regulating is harder because by the time we regulate, the technology has become obsolete and we are always catching up with it. But again, we have the example, for example, of the Framework Convention on AI. There was a big debate about how detailed and prescriptive it should be, just because we wanted it to withstand the test of time. And I mean, Mario and others know we participated as observers at first, and we were a bit skeptical also about the generic principle-based nature. But that is, in fact, a way to make sure, I mean, at the end of the day, we are not reinventing the wheel. I mean, we are just making sure that technology, that even the existing frameworks, including the human rights frameworks, are reinterpreted progressively to adapt to the evolving technology. We don't need to regulate all the time that a new technology comes about. And that's why I'm saying regulation is not so prescriptive. We are not saying if it's neurotechnology, you have to do A, B, and C. If it's agentic AI, you have to do D, E, and F. We are saying you have to ensure some key tenets. No matter how you do it, in some cases you can even have flexibility on how to do it, as long as you do it, which means you have to respect the data retention, the data privacy, the data quality. You have to respect transparency. And why? Because transparency is crucial to access to remedy. And you have to have, when we say you have to be transparent, we are not saying you have to publish everything in such a way that may even compromise your copyrights or trade rights. It means you have to publish what is sufficient for individuals or those who are affected to be able to prove if something went wrong and to be able to provide evidence to access to justice and remedy. So ultimately, we are really talking about even reusing, repurposing the existing regulation where possible to adapt it to evolving technology. So this was just, I mean, obviously, I would like to hear from you at what point you agree or disagree, but ultimately it was just to restate that I think we are talking across purposes when we say we shouldn't regulate too much, or we should be careful how we regulate because it's always, technology is always too far ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we closed our second round. I think maybe the first question was...
All right.
No, we'll do another round. That's what I did. We will... Laura, do you want to ask now? It doesn't make any difference. It was just for the sake of asking not too many questions altogether and not to confuse, but go ahead. As you like, go ahead. Go.
Thank you, Chair. Just, well, I am preparing now currently a report on violent pornography, and the prevalence of artificial intelligence in this kind of violent films can be overestimated. So we think that artificial intelligence has a great potential as a tool of deep fake porns and this kind of violent films, but also we think that could be a tool to detect this kind of content and limit its spreading. So we say that could be a part of the problem, but also a part of the solution of this kind of problem. So my question is how to materialize this kind of tools in order to fight with these very dangerous and even in what Lou said about the harm in children, because it is a spread over with no boundaries, with no limits for all the consumers, with even zero-click thing. So I think it is, for me, it's very useful, and I am here for doing this kind of questions for my report. Thank you.
You want to say?
If I can go first, because I have to go and take over from the speaker and chair very, very briefly, so I'll be very quick. To the last lady on pornography, this is discussed regularly in Parliament by so many MPs. We've dealt with, we now understand the impact of abusive images on young people. We now understand the impact of hardcore pornography on young people and violent offenders. And now we're having to deal with AI-generated pornography, which is becoming incredibly, fueling a lot of unhealthy relationships. And the challenge we have here is you can only penalise the firms that you can capture that are working in a space that is determined by international law. And so the challenge you have is there'll be firms that aren't in that space whatsoever, and how do you even find them to penalise them before they move on to another platform? And that is a big challenge that we have, but we cannot underestimate the impact of violent pornography. And that goes to the lady just before that talked about over-regulation and under-regulation. My big anxiety is that we can only regulate in a space that we understand, and we don't want to in any way inhibit that industry in Europe and the West that we can regulate, but not moving fast enough, and then enabling firms and countries that we can't regulate and penalise, moving even faster and becoming even more lucrative on the content that they share and the platforms that they have. So we just got to be aware of that, because we're talking about a space that is global, and we can only write legislation and work with partners that are like-minded to us. And I just don't think we fully appreciate there are emerging technologies, very powerful platforms and industries and countries that we can never penalise, and we will in no way inhibit the work that they're doing that will continue to damage the way that we function here in the West. So we need to be aware of that. The gentleman from Denmark that talked about regulation and monetization, that's what we're trying to deal with at the moment. Back in 2015-16, we understood quite quickly how social media platforms weren't responding to content that was terror-related next to Nike ads, for example. Soon as we were able to approach those firms, they would disable the commercialization of their material. We've got to follow the money. And when we've got good firms and good platform operators, even though we may not agree with them because they're Google and Huge and Meta and Instagram and Twitter, as soon as we can damage them commercially, they tend to move how their content can be shared, and they tend to behave a little bit better. But it's being able to understand the monetization of content is absolutely key. What we haven't quite understood is how do we stop people creating deep fakes of us and monetizing that? Where does the liabilities and responsibility lie in that space? And I don't think we've quite got there yet. And to Professor Bryson, who talked about content going in versus the quality of content coming out, this is what Marco mentioned earlier on. We're in a space that we have some sort of understanding, even though I think I know very little. And now we're trying to communicate with our constituents who in most parts know even less. And they think they're asking the most intelligent question, and then they assume that the answer is absolutely accurate. But a lot of that is based on the level of questioning that they ask. So we need to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to get our people out there to understand that these algorithms and the content they receive back is based on the question that they most definitely put in. There's a massive level of education we've got to get right. And something that Marco said earlier, most people still don't understand the power that AI has on their phones. They think they are asking free questions, they're free from mainstream media, they're free from their political representatives, but they're still being controlled by their handheld device, by the level of quality and question they put in, and they haven't quite understood that. And we've got a massive responsibility trying to explain that to them, that they're not as free as they think. Thank you, and I'm so sorry, I've got to be in the chair in 10 minutes. If that's okay, I will leave now. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Nursat. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. One word about AI tools that could help to spot that kind of content. Nothing exists like that. There are many tools, nothing works properly. Recently, an AI tool that could help to define content generated by the AI, considered the Declaration of Independence written 99% by the AI. So, and if you can apply some kind of watermark on AI-generated content, pornography, whatever, it could be easily removed, and that's another point. So it's really, it's really hard to use that way. It doesn't work. About the advertising, there is nothing completely official. So OpenAI at the moment is not responding when they ask, when people, when journalists or whatever ask them, what are they doing with us? But there are some cases like, at the beginning of this month, some Peloton and Target advertising appears during the answers, and they say it wasn't paid ads, but just a test. Then, inside the app, the Android beta version of the ChatGPT app, there is a code with written ads feature inside. So we don't know it exactly, but we see that there is a move over there. And the point is that they're looking for new business models. As you know, what they call now AI bubble is based on the fact that OpenAI is struggling because it's very costly, projecting the continued efforts to offer free AI to everybody. And one of the business models that they probably are going to introduce is AI paid advertising. The point is how, because if we about regulation, if we force them to make it very clear when an ad is ad, we'll be right. But if we don't, the risk is that they could give suggestions that are not transparent, that are based on ads. Could you imagine what it could happen to kids or to young people when they ask for help for anything and the result comes from a paid advertising? Do not mention the politically adversary from different and enemies, countries that could use it for disrupting us. I think I answered.
Thank you. Do you want to add something? Yes.
I wanted to come in on the deepfake new law in Denmark, which I think is a very promising avenue to give people control over the proliferation of deepfakes. I would say what is maybe missing is a core piece of the puzzle, which is what are online platforms doing to curtail the proliferation of deepfakes. Surely this law will motivate them to have more sophisticated detection processes or just processes, period. But it'd be really useful to have some mandated disclosure from companies as to what are they doing to identify proactively deepfakes, what are they doing to ensure takedown rates, and what numbers essentially are at play. The companies, I think, in the US have already done this for different types of illegal content back when the Santa Clara Declaration of Principles were agreed, which were an industry-led standard which had to do with steps taken to reduce illegal content on their platforms. That level of granularity has, I think, not been seen in any other industry-led standard since then. So, for example, the AI Elections Accord that we're seeing in 2024, which was, again, an industry-agreed standard to detect and address AI-generated content on online platforms. 27 tech companies signed it. It was very vague and unspecific. So going back to those levels of granularity would be really useful, and also complement the exercise of individual rights on the side of people affected by deepfakes, which might be a bit slow at first.
If our speakers have no more comments, I will give the floor for the last question. Please.
Thank you. So there are a pair of new papers released on the 4th of December which show that bots can successfully shift political attitudes, even when what the bots are claiming is wrong. So the scope for mass-scale political interference in democratic processes, just through what we have already, is quite large. So my question really is, how do we tackle the problem that the US executive orders that have been issued in both June this year and more recently this week require large language models built in the US to be suitable for Americans, which means making sure that ideological biases or social agendas aren't built into those models, which on the face of it sounds all right, but then the definition of what an ideological bias is, to me strikes at the heart of much of what it means to be a democratic European and human rights values, including, and I quote, the incorporation of concepts like discrimination on the basis of race or sex. This has already resulted in at least 2 companies rebiasing their large language models, and these are the basis on which we're building much of the kind of tech that we've been talking about to try and enhance or improve democracy. So it all changes the nature of what the models are and what they're doing on a fairly fundamental basis, and it seems to be the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. So I wondered what the panel's answer to that is.
I'd like to thank the participant for raising this frankly jarring study. I mean, this speaks more broadly to the question of freedom of expression. Can we really talk of there being freedom of expression, freedom of opinion, when these types of LLMs are being commonly used and even widespread? To me, the immediate reaction that this generates is we can't really assume that private sector entities are like-minded, like the speaker that just left was saying. I don't think there is a lot of alignment between what the public sector wants to do and what private entities want to do. The only thing they're looking for is to increase their bottom line. Their only motivation is to increase profit, and that's always been the way it's been for companies. So this, to me, brings to the fore the question of to what extent do we want to integrate these instruments and these tools that might be generated or developed by private sector actors who, with the change in political wind, might then carry out significant changes to the technologies they deploy to then service a particular political agenda. For me, it's an open question.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody. I think that in a few minutes we will be sipping happily some coffee, and I hope you'll enjoy it. I want to thank all all the speakers to this panel, so Laura, Daniel, Nursat, and Marco. I think that the panel provided some very interesting food for thought and some contribution to the general outcome of this event. Thank you for all the questions you asked. All of them have been an opportunity to go even further and more thoroughly into the matter. So thank you so much for now, and look forward to the next session in maybe 20 minutes from now, something like that.
And thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Deborah.